Yes, we'll rally round the flag, boys, we'll rally once again.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
We will rally from the hillside, we'll gather from the plain.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah. Down with the traitors, up with the star, while we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again. Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
We are springing to the call of our brothers gone before.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
And we'll fill our vanquished ranks with 1,000,000 free men more.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah. Down with the traitors, up with the star, while we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again. Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
We will welcome to our numbers the loyal, true, and brave.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
And although they may be poor, not a man shall be a slave.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah. Down with the traitors, up with the star, while we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again. Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
So we're springing to the call from the east and from the west.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
And we'll hurl the rebel crew from the land we love the best.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah. Down with the traitors, up with the star, while we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again. Shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah. Down with the traitors, up with the star, while we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again. Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
Good evening and welcome to the Friday Symposium with Diane Sare. I'm Diane Sare, LaRouche Independent candidate for U.S. Senate, challenging Chuck Schumer in 2022. And I thought it was appropriate to begin our program this Thanksgiving week with music from the so-called Civil War, really should be called the War of the Rebellion, or an actual insurrection, unlike certain things that are being called insurrections by people nowadays. We have a number of really wonderful guests to discuss the question of food insecurity, hunger, and farming. And I will be introducing them all shortly. Maybe if they're here, if it's possible to bring them up, we'll quickly say who's going to be joining me this evening. Are they here, Jose? Okay, well, we have by phone and by video Scott Hutchins, who is a former Green Party candidate for various offices, including Congress. Carmen Quinones, who is, I think, getting on maybe one of those black screens, who is the president of the Tenants Association of the Frederick Douglass Houses in Manhattan. Danette Rivera, who is a very important activist running a community center food pantry in Queens. Angel Cushing, farmer from Kansas, who has been with us before, and Dennis Speed, my co-host. There's Danette. Hi, Danette. Welcome. And Dennis Speed, who's my co-host and is the coordinator for the LaRouche Manhattan Project. So now, just to get us started, there's a few things that I wanted to share with you, because the truth of the matter is we really are at a point of total collapse of the financial system. And we have a situation globally where over 270 million people are facing food insecurity or starvation. You have severe cases like that in Afghanistan, where it's possible that as many as 23 million people, that is 55% of that population, may not make it through the winter due to starvation and cold. Afghanistan is very rough terrain. It's rough in the winter. They suffered a drought. And under the instructions of the Biden administration and our Treasury Secretary, the New York Federal Reserve is sitting on $9.2 billion that belongs to the Afghan Central Bank and refusing to release it. And you have some people in the United States who are so sadistic and insane as to argue that perhaps our sanctions against the Taliban are not harsh enough, and it's terrible that China and Russia are violating them. Well, what are China and Russia doing? They're trying to get food and clothing into Afghanistan so tens of millions of people don't die this winter. It's not very long before the snow and ice will make certain roads impassable. So it's a very, very desperate situation. You have a similar situation in Yemen, which has been bombed by Saudi Arabia with weapons supplied by the United States and blockaded, and you have mass starvation there. You have a situation in Haiti, which is very dire, where thanks to people like Senator Schumer, the nation has been turned into a transshipment point for drugs. So the drug gangs have more advanced weapons and more control than the actual government. And it goes on. What many Americans may not be sufficiently aware of is that there is also significant hunger in the United States, perhaps not on the scale or to the point of absolute starvation as we see in other countries, but nonetheless severe and worsening. But we'll hear from the people who are experts on that. What I wanted to present is the state of the financial system. So I'm going to share my screen here with you for a moment. And we're going to first go to this. There you see my friend, the late Lyndon LaRouche, and on the left side of the screen, a diagram that he came up with actually in late 1995, early 96, called the triple curve function, where you have this gold curve on the bottom, which is physical economic input and physical production, physical goods. The green curve, which is money, that's what they call today quantitative easing, and the financial aggregates, things in the stock market, bonds, derivatives, that kind of thing. In 2008, after that crash, we reached this little point here where the amount of money that we're printing is going up even faster than the aggregates. And what this is called is a typical collapse function. It is not three separate functions. It is one function. And the more you go this way in terms of time, the more divergent these things get. So we're literally at the point that the more this goes up, the more you are sucking out of the physical economy. That is, the higher the stock market is, the worse the economy is. And I wanted to give you a graphic example that you wouldn't forget, which is right here. Here is a tick on the left, and here is a tick on the right after it has gorged itself. You see how pathetic. It's so stuffed that its legs are split off over here on the side. So you can imagine that the more the tick grows, instead of if this tick were on a human, imagine if this tick weighed 10 pounds and it was on a chihuahua. At a certain point, the tick would have sucked everything out of the chihuahua would die. And in a sense, that's what the financial market is doing to our physical economy. They're sucking the lifeblood out of those things that allow us to survive. And what Lyndon LaRouche proposed is that you have to declare this system bankrupt. Just write it off. We are under no obligation to honor bad gambling debts. We are under obligation to protect the general welfare. And in that regard, I wanted to share with you a couple of excerpts from the first inaugural address of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. People are familiar with the quote, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." But I'm going to share a little bit more explicitly because at the time we had about 25% unemployment, we had terrible hunger, many things similar to what the United States looks like today. And here, I'll just read you. After he says, "I'm convinced that you will again give that support to leadership in these critical," he says, "in every dark hour of our national life, a leadership of frankness and vigor has met with that understanding and support of the people themselves, which is essential to victory. Here, in such a spirit on my part and on yours, we face our common difficulties. They concern, thank God, only material things. Today, I would say they face also immaterial things like culture, spirituality, morality, but at any rate, only material things. Values have shrunken to fantastic levels, taxes have risen, our ability to pay has fallen. Government of all kinds is faced by serious curtailment of income. The means of exchange are frozen in the currents of trade. The withered leaves of industrial enterprise lie on every side. Farmers find no markets for their produce. The savings of many years and thousands of families are gone. Yet, our distress comes from no failure of substance. We are stricken by no plague of locusts. Compared with the perils which our forefathers conquered, because they believed and were not afraid, we still have much to be thankful for. Nature still offers her bounty, and human efforts have multiplied it. Plenty is at our doorstep, but a generous use of it languishes in the very sight of the supply. Primarily, this is because the rulers of the exchange of mankind's goods have failed through their own stubbornness and their own incompetence, have admitted their failure and abdicated. Practices of the unscrupulous money changers stand indicted in the court of public opinion, rejected by the hearts and minds of men. And shortly, I'm skipping a few paragraphs, recognition of the falsity of material wealth as the standard of success goes hand in hand with the abandonment of the false belief that public office and high political position are to be valued only by the standards of pride, of place, and personal profit. And there must be an end to a conduct in banking and in business which too often has given to a sacred trust the likeness of callous and selfish wrongdoing. Small wonder that confidence languishes, for it thrives only on honesty, on honor, on the sacredness of obligations, on faithful protection, on unselfish performance. Without them, it cannot live. So I think this is very similar in some ways to today, particularly also this question of the lack of trust in the government, which we see playing out with this question of vaccines and public health measures, where people are doubtful because they have seen many indications that the government doesn't seem to actually be that concerned with the general welfare of the population, and they're looking for that good faith to be restored. And I would just say that the London Economist actually revealed their intent when they said that in a nation, if you want to destabilize a nation or overthrow a nation, then you have to destroy the bond of trust between the people and the government. Now, think about what the United States looks like today. So, this has to be addressed. The first step is for the leadership to actually tell the truth about the situation that people are facing. And to that end, I invited the guests that I have tonight. So, now what I'd like to do is turn first to the video from Scott Hutchins, which I think will give you some insights as to what we are facing, and we will go from there. Oh, and one thing I should say, participation in the Sare for Senate Friday Symposium does not constitute endorsement of my candidacy for U.S. Senate. The views that people express here are their own. I may or may not agree with everything expressed here, but we are having this discussion in order to bring to people's attention urgent matters and to allow a free exchange of ideas, which you don't get otherwise. So with that, we'll go to Scott Hutchins' video.
But I'm here to talk about the homelessness issue, which I consider to actually be more of a housing and jobs issue. We can talk about that a little more later on. But my experience is that I was a homeless person living in the shelter system from May 25th, 2012 to August 25th, 2020, when I exited the shelter system through the City FEPS program, which means I'm still entirely dependent on the government in order to pay for my housing. So, let's talk about how this started. I came to New York in 2003 as a graduate student at the College of Staten Island. I studied cinema and media studies, which was my concentration as an undergraduate with an English and communication degree. I graduated from Indiana University's Indianapolis campus in 1999, which, according to the Washington Post, is the month job growth went to net zero. So, after graduating from college, I couldn't find much other than temp work. It was very sporadic. I would have something for a few months. It would take a few months for me to get something else. I enrolled for my 7th temp service on 9/11 while I was still in Indianapolis. The news footage was actually playing during the interview, and that particular temp service never placed me. The last thing I did before I moved to New York for graduate school, I was a scorer for Pearson Education, and I even got to supervise. I had about 7 people who I supervised over the internet, in a work from home job to make sure they were scoring these tests correctly, and if they weren't, to make sure they understood what they were doing incorrectly. So I'm not someone with little experience. I did quite a bit of office work through that temping. Before that, I was doing call center work. Before that, I worked in a supermarket. And I have physical challenges. I have multiple herniated discs. I have scoliosis. I have sciatica in both legs and tendinosis in both feet. I finally got ankle braces for that tendinosis because that took 20 years to get a proper diagnosis. And that may be helping me, but it's still very difficult for me to stand for any length of time. And I use a cane to help me if I expect to stand for a long period of time. And the sciatica makes it very difficult for me to sit in a vehicle for long periods of time. So it really limits what I'm able to do. But disability says I can do a desk job. And I don't have a doctor who disagrees with that. And I personally don't disagree with that. And I didn't run up $75,000 in student loan debt just to sit around in my apartment doing nothing. And I've written a dozen scripts, 7 of which are finished, or at least in a finished form, and have not gotten any traction from anyone actually willing to read these things. It's always, I send out a query letter, and so I'm not taking any new clients at this time, and that's it. That's from that period, May 25th, 2012 to August 25th, 2020, I applied for 3,895 jobs. I interviewed for 33 of them, many of which were scams, including the sell insurance at your own expense scam that Barbara Ehrenreich spends a chapter of Bait and Switch on. A number of them are the entry-level marketing scam, which is basically a door-to-door sales job, which is not represented at all how they present it in the advertising. And a lot of the others were temp agency intakes, which often were not me intentionally applying to a temp agency, but for applying through a job that was a cover for a temp agency. And I had 8 jobs, and the most the steadiest of those, one was they're basically gigs, because we are in a gig economy, and that's what's available. These jobs didn't pay very well. In 2015, I was making minimum wage despite having earned a master's degree in 2005. And we need to talk about this thing because a lot of people like to talk about homelessness in terms of drug addiction and mental illness. And this is a serious problem because that's not an accurate way to describe the majority of homeless. People think it is because the media has a problem with that. I published an article on Hopes and Fears, an online magazine in 2015, and my editor found a 2014 report from the Department of Housing and Urban Development that says only 20.1% of homeless Americans reported having chronic substance abuse problems. The same study shows that only 20.2% reported severe mental illness. So as I was talking about in these back to work programs, they would have you meet with a job developer, and the job developer would present a job description to you that had no contact information, no company name, nothing of that nature in it. And this usually resulted in the next meeting, one of 2 things would happen. I knew there was something I was supposed to do. Would come from the job developer. Or he would say, I called them and they wanted a female. That's, of course, illegal, but without any sort of contact information or knowing anything about this company, how am I supposed to file a lawsuit? There's just no way. There's not enough information to do that. And according to a pre-pandemic report from Coalition for the Homeless, 43% of the total number of homeless people in New York, of which 23% are under 18, work. In 2015, BRC broke ground on the Landing Road Residence in University Heights, which would subsidize 135 units of so-called affordable housing, with the profits gained from a 200-bed shelter for homeless working adults. It opened in 2018 despite opposition from groups such as Picture the Homeless, which I've represented on numerous occasions. And let's talk about jobs. According to the Brookings Institution's November 2019 study, there are 7.6 million people ages 25 to 50 with an associate's degree or higher, 64% of which have a bachelor's degree in low-wage work. The press release headline was, "Low-wage work is more pervasive than you think, and there aren't enough good jobs to go around." They concluded that 44% of all Americans were working in low-wage jobs with a median income of $10.22 per hour. While this doesn't adjust for New York City's $15 an hour minimum wage, 93,000 homeless in New York State shows that people aren't making enough to live on. A few months before that, April 2019, there was an article on Activist Post stating that 102 million Americans were out of work, higher than in the so-called Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. A 2016 study from Princeton showed that almost all jobs created since 2005 were temporary. A 2015 report from the Economic Policy Institute showed that the unemployed exceed job openings in every industry except for healthcare. A 2010 article by Neil Irwin in the Washington Post stated there has been zero net job creation since December 1999. Ding, ding, ding. That's the month that I got my bachelor's degree. No previous decade going back to the 1940s had job growth of less than 20%. Economic output rose at its slowest rate of any decade since the 1930s as well. Middle-income households made less than in 2008 when adjusted for inflation than they did in 1999, and the numbers sure to decline further during a difficult 2009. The aughts were the first decade of falling median income since figures were compiled in the 1960s. By net zero job growth, it means, numerically speaking, all new job openings are vacated positions. Adjusted for inflation, the average truck driver salary has decreased 63% since 1980, and the average construction worker salary has fallen 500% since 1972. At one of my shelters, one of my roommates was a machinist in his 50s. He couldn't find work. They tell us to go to job fairs. The job fairs were all sales jobs, even before I became homeless. Like, my father passed away in 2007. He found information about a media job fair at a hotel, and I went there. It was all sales. It was media companies, but it was all sales jobs.
Great. Thank you very much. So I know, just to Jose, we're having some trouble with our connections. Carmen is trying to get on. She's having the same trouble I am. So Carmen, if you hear me, just keep trying. I finally managed to get back in. So right now, I'd like to go to Danette Rivera to tell us something about your program, why you started it, and also something about the people who are food insecure in the United States, because from what Scott was just saying, it seems to me that, contrary to the picture we're often given, that everybody who is dependent on food or housing is some kind of lazy bum who's doesn't want to work. This is not the case at all. So welcome, Danette, and go ahead.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thank you for inviting me to this forum. Let me get to my notes. So, again, my name is Danette Rivera, and I am the executive director of a community center that runs a food pantry. My community center is Jesus is the Answer, and it's located in Jamaica, Queens. I've been operating my food pantry for 6 years now, mostly in the area of Jamaica, Queens. And I started my food pantry because I myself was a homeless individual, and I've had my share of experiences with hunger, the food pantry, and things of that nature. I was homeless both in the street and I was in the shelter. So I seen both sides of the coin in homelessness. I am a firm believer in Almighty God, and I believe that as God has blessed me and bestowed upon me the ability to no longer have to be hungry or live the way I was living, which was, unfortunate, that now it's my time to give back. And that's what I'm doing. At my food pantry in Jamaica, Queens, we serve 200 clients average a day, 2 times a week. And usually the same story. We have the local immigrants with huge families that come to our food pantries. We have the single males who live in a rented room because that's all they can afford at the time. We have the typical homeowner who's struggling to make ends meet. The senior who barely has anyone to help them with the basic necessities. And then there's the homeless, the kind that live in a shelter and the kind that would rather weather the storm in the streets. You know, as I said, I've done both. Whoever my clients are, they all have one thing in common, and that is that they need food. I believe that food hunger is not only shouldn't exist, but it shouldn't even be an option in this country. So much food goes to waste in this country for a lack of humanity. Huge corporations, supermarkets, all the way down to the local bodega would rather throw food away than give it to those who are in need, all in the name of the mighty dollar.
Think of me as a
All in the name of the mighty dollar. Farmers give us both resource as well as health benefits. So it's crucial that we support our local farmers. And I was going to say that as much as food is essential, the quality of the food we eat is even more crucial. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're having and continuing to experience technical problems. I understand that Carmen Quinones has now connected. Are you there, Carmen?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. Do you hear me?
We can hear you, and your image is okay. So we would just ask that you go next. Again, Diane will be back with us when she is able to reconnect. But if you could make your remarks now.
Well, my name is Carmen Quinones, and I am the president of Douglas Houses and the CEO of Occupy NYCHA. Occupy NYCHA is, I have like 12 different developments under me. We are trying to, we are doing it. Actually, we're fighting for resident management instead of PAC, the blueprint, and RAD, which takes away the rights of residents who live in public housing. So we just had a vote, and we'll probably be the first actually pilot program for resident management here in New York. So we've been doing a lot of that. Wanted to talk about a little bit about the food insecurities that we're having. We're having a lot of food insecurities. I feed people almost every day. We deliver like 18,000 pounds of food per week. And it seems like it's still growing, which is a big concern. Um, and I'm just here to really listen to what people are talking about. I know that we definitely have to get people and rather teach people how to vote, because this Democratic Republican, this should be about the human race, not party. A person that is out there on the ground, like Susan, um, that is doing the work. Our people are so accustomed to voting. I am a Democrat. Let's not get that twisted, but we have to make sure that we teach our people that just voting Democrat is not the way, just voting Republican is not the way. Um, what we need to really talk about is what is happening every day to our people and why it's so important that we register people to vote. And it doesn't have to be a party line. We need to make sure that people know that to vote for the person that you know that's on the ground doing the work. Our elected officials have sold us out every step of the way. Harlem, East Harlem, you name it. Um, I just ran for city council, came in second, but just to see what our society is doing to our people is really disturbing. I have 19 grandkids and 13 great grand. So this is a fight that I'm in for the long haul. But there's just so many things that we need to cover. And I really believe that the first thing we need to do is start the education on why people vote and why, what is it that you really want to see. We can't keep voting the same people in that are selling us out. This election was about the ugliest election, and I've been here 35 years, doing this 35 years. I mean, I run campaigns, grassroots. I have my own organization as a consultant, but I've never seen so much ugliness in this campaign like I've seen it this year, and it's getting worse. And what is happening is that the elected officials that are in position from Congress on down are literally trying to shut us down. And when I say us, it's the little people, us, because they want to govern every aspect of the city. So they are putting forces there that know nothing about what's going on, but they are getting these people elected with big fat donors, especially when we talk about landlords and stuff like that. You know what I'm talking about. I don't have to spell it out. But I tell you this much, man, we got our work cut out for us. We really, really do. It is just so sad that our people are being treated like they don't exist. So I'm going to stop there. If you have any other questions for me, please feel free to um, to ask me. But we really have to teach people to go with the person that's doing the work, not party line officials. We need to stop that. We really need to teach our people that voting Democrat is not the way, that voting Republican is not the way. It's about the human race and what we're bringing to the human race. So I'm going to
Well,
leave it there. Hi, Sue.
hi,
So,
Carmen. Thank you very, very much. So I'm going to go to Angel, and then I'm really eager to have the discussion with everyone who's here because we share so much in common. And Danette didn't, I didn't know how long. Anyway, I have questions that we'll get to when we can all discuss this because the point is, as both of you are reflecting, this is completely unnecessary and beneath human dignity. And there are categories of people who are just thrown on the scrap heap. I think Angel may tell us some things that are happening in terms of agriculture, which people should be aware of because there are no food shortages, but there definitely seem to be trying to create one with all of this green energy, other stuff. So, Angel, go ahead. And any thoughts you have on what you've heard so far would be appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me here back again. I love the way y'all talk. Your accents is beautiful and wonderful, and 50% of the reason why I'm here is just to listen to y'all's accent. I'm in Kansas, as you know, and I can tell you that we can produce the food for the whole entire world. So if China and England and Russia and all those countries decided to take a vacation and not produce any food, just the farmers here in the United States could do it if they were allowed to. And that is the problem. I actually brought a map. I didn't get a chance to upload it, but I can show it to you. This is a map of the United States. Forgive me, I'm going to block out my head and try to hold this still real quick if you can see that. That is a map of the United States. And all of that light gray or that light green area in there, that's what we call CRP or Conservation Reserve Program. All those other little colors, especially out here in the West, that is all owned by the state or federal government in some kind of preserve, recreation, something. The moral of that story is that most of the lands in America are administered by the United States government in one form or another, which means we have to ask permission to farm. The sad part is that most farmers object to this. Very few of them do. I think they've kind of gotten used to being treated that way. When I go and talk to farmers, one of the stories that I tell is of training horses. And this is going to be an interesting story for folks in New York City. But a horse is a very heavy, large animal. On average, it weighs about 1,000 pounds. And it know that when it bites you, it can break your skin and crush bones. It does not know that if it kicks you, that it can kill you. The horse thinks that it does absolutely no more damage to you than it does to any other horse, because a horse cannot see weight. It just sees you like a horse. So I had this horse that I was training one time, and under the saddle, he was beautiful, he's wonderful, he did great. Off of saddle, he was awful and in your space and quite dangerous. And I cried to the old timers, and they put me in this training session. And then one time in the middle of training, this little old man, tiny little fella, came over and he shoved me and he launched me across the pen, and I landed on my rear end, and I looked up at him and he said to me, "Did you like that?" So, "Well, no, sir. No, sir, I did not." He said, "Well, why are you letting your horse do it then?" And he was absolutely right. I did not realize that I was allowing that horse, because I loved him so much. I did not realize that I was allowing that horse to invade my personal space and create a very dangerous situation. And then once the horse saw that I did that, he was encouraged to continue to do that and to continue to push a little bit more. And I think that's kind of the groove that farmers have gotten into when it comes to farm bills and USDA programs. They're getting used to being pushed around and allowing their space to be invaded, that they don't notice that it's encroaching further and further and further. And it's gotten to the point where the deck is now stacked against us. I'm not sure if you're aware of what we have in the Packer monopoly, where we have 4 large meat packing plants that have set the prices to bankrupt all of the livestock producers in the United States. And the reason they want to do that is because they can get that meat from overseas a lot cheaper and import it. And right now, there's a big fight going on about cool labeling. And what that is the farmer demanding that the United States put labeling on beef or pork, so that consumers will know whether they're buying USA produced or whether they're buying overseas. Most people don't realize when they go to the supermarket, they have a 35% chance that meat is probably imported from other countries. So the situation is rather dire. They were absolutely right about the trucking industry. We do have I gotta end this. Sorry. We do have a loss in pay, and not only truckers, but in everything. It just doesn't seem like. I mean, I remember my father was a trucker. He made an awful lot of money, and that money went a lot further than it is today. Right now, there is a huge shortage of truckers, especially out here in the Midwest, and these products get hauled everywhere. We've become so globalized that very little of our food is produced locally. I mean, I'm out here in the middle of the country, and my milk is still brought in from somewhere else, from a dairy farm that's quite a ways away. So this has become a very common problem. Under COVID, I think we learned to shop locally and we learned to look locally, but there are so many laws for inspections and how we can sell and when we can sell, that it's nearly impossible to do that without breaking a law. You know, I joke, the reason I got into this, because it's getting bad enough where I can't even go out the door and feed my animals without the worry of breaking some kind of regulation somewhere. And on top of that, you have the animal rights organizations, and there's a big difference between animal rights and animal care and animal welfare. There are people out there who do abuse animals, and they should be prosecuted. However, when we start to paint the picture that everybody is an abuser, then anybody who owns an animal is simply guilty of abuse for simply owning an animal. So we have all of that looking at us in the livestock production. In the grain production, I often tell people it's not the farmer that dips that potato in an acid wash to keep it from sprouting on the shelf. It's not the dairyman that puts in the antibiotics in the milk to make it last longer on the shelf. That happens through a lot of cronyism, a lot of monopolizing and a lot of purchase of their local and federal officials to ensure that the little guy doesn't stand a chance to get up on their feet and become competitive with those bigger markets. So it's a mess. It is. It really is. The good news is we absolutely can feed the world. The bad news is that there's a big, huge, whether it's large monopolies, whether it's government entities, whether it's concerned citizens who are not understanding what they're buying, so they're asking for more regulations, not realizing that they're hurting themselves when they do that. And it's also farmers that don't quite understand that they are allowing other people to make decisions for them. And this is shocking when I say to a farmer, if your cows can produce a calf next year, you're an environmentalist. Congratulations, you're sustainable. If your ground is healthy enough to grow plants again next year, congratulations, you are an environmentalist, you're sustainable. I don't even think they realize that. They're so used to being told that they're doing it wrong, they naturally just go the way that they are told. Unfortunately, that direction is to turn most of American lands back into wilderness and import that food into the United States. The bad news is on that it's going to get really expensive having to do that. Very, very expensive. And the poorer you are, the less likely you're going to be able to buy enough nutrition to sustain you. So on your local level, it's really important to ask your state where they are on personal property rights issues, because the reason that map with that much federal control is there is because we've forgotten to ask our local officials about that. It comes down to that rental unit. I mean, every tenant has rights within their own dwelling, within their own home, right? Well, you as a farmer should have that same right in your barn. So, and it's kind of a two-way street there. They don't understand that what is in their house is as important to them as what is in my barn is to me. So that's where are their properties and how do they feel about those, and where are they on regulations? Do you think you should require a permit to be a truck driver, and how far should that go? Because that eventually hurts the bottom line. My husband is a trucker, he delivers propane, and when you start treating them like criminals because they simply get behind the truck, they must be evil, they must be horrible drivers, and they're hitting the road to kill people, that's really discouraging in that job market. So there has to be a culture shift as well, and that is a big and larger than electing the right people. Is you have to convince people, me as a farmer, I have to convince people that I am not going to poison you. What I sell to you, I also eat. And having forums like this, that helps considerably, and I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Now, Jose, is Scott on, and can you put everyone up who's here so we can all look at each other? There we go. Oh, good. So Scott made it. And are Danette and Carmen still with us? Oh, there's Danette. Well, perhaps, Scott, I'll just go to you if you have any thoughts. And then, oh, there's Carmen. Great. We're all here. So I imagine people may have some thoughts now that we're together. I mean, I actually think we really need some kind of alliance between the cities and the farmers, because the cities we don't have enough land in the city to be able to grow our own food. It's absurd in the United States with this potential of agriculture that we're importing food, in a lot of cases importing food from countries which are starving themselves, which is outrageous. And you're talking about all kinds of questions of preservatives. I mean, do you really want food? I don't know if it was real or not, but the scariest video I ever saw was what a Big Mac hamburger looked like after 3 years. I don't know if people have seen this. It looked identical to what it looks like when it's new. So it makes you wonder what on earth is in this thing, if that's the case. But these are anyway. There's a lot to address. So Scott, if you have things, just a couple minute response, and then I'd like to go to Dennis and see what thoughts he has.
Well, I think there was everyone had a really good presentation, at least what I was able to see when I wasn't off the internet, and I'd like to hear more. Do you have any questions for me?
Good.
Yeah, I have
Yeah,
questions.
sure. Maybe I'll try to go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I think we have several people on that can answer a lot of questions, and I think it's important to try to get a picture which is an explicit picture of what we've actually been hearing. Scott was making the point that he thinks that this is much more a housing and employment crisis than it is a homelessness crisis. I believe he used a statistic that indicated that, contrary to popular belief, about 20% of the people, or a little bit over that, who are homeless have some sort of drug or related problem. And you actually probably would find that among people who have homes, if you were to really take a look at that. I think we should take a look at or reference some of those things. But here's my general observation, and then I have questions for several people. I think that Carmen made a very persuasive presentation concerning the need to think outside of partisan divides, because actually policy is not being implemented on the part of people on behalf of the general welfare. There's a word, and I don't know if people know the word, but the word is depredation. Depredation means looting. It means predatory, like if you think about somebody preying on somebody, depredation. And what I'm hearing, particularly with respect to what was said by Angel concerning what's happening with farmers, is a circumstance in which you have a kind of enforced dependency. In fact, what Scott's point was, hey, he said he was over 3,000 jobs at one point, interviewed for 33 plus jobs, but the jobs he's interviewing for are really de-industrial jobs. Just to say one thing to people, some of us who go back to 1980, 81 know that there was a time in the United States where there was a move made for the deindustrialization of the U.S., where, for example, the steel factories in Pittsburgh were blown up. This was back in 1985. And the concept was, we're going into this new age, new era, where we're going to have these really high-paying jobs, and they're going to be involved in computer technology and things like that. And everybody's going to be getting these jobs. So we're going to get out of these old jobs, which are old Rust Belt era jobs, sunset jobs is what they called them. We're going to go into the new sunrise, the new day, where everybody's going to be way, way richer than they are now. And they're going to all have to have college degrees in order to get good jobs, blah, blah, blah. That was 40 years ago. You see where we are and what we're talking about here. So I have a few things I want to ask kind of a general question to everybody in terms of what you've heard one another say. What do you think would need to be done to create an understanding so that Danette, who was also homeless, as she said, on the street and in the shelter system, Scott, who's very clear about the question of housing and employment being the problem, Carmen, who has experience as an actual political campaign organizer and is thinking, hey, I've got to break through this crazy idea of the divide, and then Angel, who of course represents, and it's important what she said actually about that accent thing. Let me explain something. This country is made up of a lot of really different people in a lot of really different areas with very different experience. That's usually used against one another. It's used against us all. So we're divided. But she laid out a policy of taking away the land from farmers. And I'll just give you, Angel, one thing you probably wouldn't know about. It's a thing down in Philadelphia called the Fletcher Street Riding Club. There's a bunch of what are called the Black Cowboys. Some people know about it because there was a recent film made about it, which is about this urban cowboy phenomenon. They've existed for 100 years. And what they do is they were basically rescuing horses that were otherwise going to get killed, and then they were bringing them up, and they were actually housing those horses in stables and so forth, right in the middle of North Philadelphia. Now they still do this, and we're still largely supported. They call it Concrete Cowboys. That was the name of the movie that was made about it. But recently, the city there acquired the land that they've been on for decades for $1. And now what they're starting to do is do housing development on it. And what they're essentially doing is trying to destroy what is a 100-year-old, century-year-old institution. And just to say something about this, I'm from the area of Philadelphia. We used to grow food. You know, you can grow food right there in those areas. Yes, some of it is small truck farming, but what's important is that you used to get your produce in that area from 40, 50 miles outside, or like, let's say, or from southern Jersey into that area of Philadelphia. So what you see, and I'd like just to hear what people's thoughts are about in what way you think we've got to, first of all, fill in the picture a bit more so people understand it. And secondly, what would you want to see happen if you had the ability to do it in terms of the creation of some kind of not just a forum, but a kind of a united front of the people that are here represented that could address these questions. So that's for anybody on the panel.
May I jump in first?
Sure.
Sure.
At a policy level, I would like to see a lot of these federal permitting and inspection processes given over to the state. I think the people in Philadelphia, for example, probably in Pennsylvania have a better idea of the nutritional needs of people in Pennsylvania than I in Kansas do for Pennsylvania. I think that the states would do an awful lot better job of inspecting than the federal government could, and that it would free up and allow for transportation a lot better. It would also have a lot more direct control from consumer to the farmer without all the processors, or without as much of the processors in the middle profiting off of that. I would love to see the permitting of allowing gardens in your backyard, or even a chicken or two. I know that that's probably really bad news in a lot of neighborhoods, but gee, you ought to have the right to feed yourself, and eggs are really easy. Chickens are really easy to feed, and eggs are a cheap, easy way of guaranteed food for at least one person in that household. Some of those things, the biggest thing that I see is there's a huge divide, and some of the questions that I get about everyday farming baffle me, like using horses, for example. I've actually had people, and they live here in Kansas, pull up to my driveway and rush out there for an emergency because my horse was eating grass instead of hay. So we have to put a lot of that process of people understanding where their food comes from and back into the early educational, and be able to learn how to talk about anatomy. I can roll that over into COVID, in the big controversy about ivermectin. All of us here in the farms are kind of throwing up our arms, not understanding what the big deal is, because this is something we deal with every day. But for somebody that's in the city that doesn't have this on their hands and haven't used this would be a very scary, very controversial thing. A lot of these medications are. I would like to see, I think COVID has actually kind of helped us a little bit, because due to the packing plants, a lot of them being shut down, it did make people more interested in finding that very local source of food rather than their supermarket chain, their favorite supermarket chain. So I think that conversation, the good news is that conversation starting and going. I love what Carmen was talking about, love her ideas. I think that that's actually very, very brilliant. It has to come out beyond that. I volunteer for an organization because of this issue and the federal overreach. Policy-wise, I understand why we have a lot of regulations on, say, truckers. I do understand them. I do. but there's got to be a better way of getting you the goods without tying their hands behind their backs. Maybe if a lot of that were a little bit more local produce and they weren't waiting all of it to come in of ships in the ports, that maybe that would alleviate some of that tension.
Very good.
Definitely, with the states should have more power, where instead of the government, it should be between the states and the farmers. I was gonna say that she said it first, so I'm glad she said it, because now I know I'm not crazy. I had a friend whose father, many years ago, owned lands in Jamaica, Queens, and part of that land went into the Vanwick, and he would grow food on that soil, and he would literally give it away to the community, to his neighbors, and to anyone who wanted food. They had free access to it, and the government created laws that didn't permit him to continue to do that and stripped him from that right. And so, I see that the government will do whatever it takes to put their foot on our necks and prevent us from actually being able to self-sustain. And I don't think that should be allowed any longer. I think that we've been silent for way too long, and I think that anyone who has a voice needs to speak up now and really start, fighting back against this whole bureaucracy, where the little where us, the little people, people who are just trying to make ends meet, are being prevented from doing it due to some law, some regulation, or some code, or some, like the lady was saying, that keeps being being invented to prevent us from succeeding and always being dependent and reliant on the government. We need to cut all ties with the government that we can, and we need to be able to self-sustain once again, and find a way to do that, and find a way now.
Just sitting here and listening, it's like I'm I'm a rebel, and I have been in this field for 35 years. Um, I've made the best, actually made monsters from what I see now. Um, I have to say, because I have three brothers that are truckers, so I understand exactly what you're talking about, having their hands tied. I'm from Puerto Rico. My father taught me how to grow food. I have started a garden out here now, just about 6 months ago. And we're teaching the kids what it is to grow food and how important it is to grow food. But the main reason that I really made that space was because of COVID. And what I saw, I have 3,000 people here that I that are under me, okay? And I have to make sure that these people are right. I just finished getting 2 buildings gas back before Thanksgiving. So that was what I was doing. But again, you know, if we don't if we don't start fighting, and I'm tired of saying the same old thing. Everything is a battle, and it's sad because in this battle, our children are there, our grandchildren are there, um, our grandparents are there, and it seems like the same people we keep electing do the same thing. And until we start going in the communities and bringing it back to the people, I believe in making committees of people, the people that live in that district. We need to bring it back to the street, make committees of residents, community people. Take it away from the elected officials. The elected officials have too much power. And the more we elect them and the more power they get, they're stomping us. they are literally killing us, and it seems like I don't know what else to do, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think I do more than enough, but it's never enough. And if we don't reach out to the community from where we live, and you don't have to be an elected official or have a title, because titles mean nothing if you don't do anything about it. So having a title is nothing. But if we can go in our communities, find the people that want to change things and make committees within every maybe 5 blocks, right? And have them do a committee on housing, homeless, a committee on covert, which is a big thing because people are scared of this. I mean, I've been feeding people now since March, when every elected official literally hid. I was out here, and I call them my heroes because my residents are heroes. We were the ones that saw the bodies coming out of the apartments. We were the ones delivering food to the people that couldn't get out. Where were they? Where were they? And until we start taking things back and really putting them online, if you go to my, if you go on any of my pages, you'll see I'm always telling an elected official off. Why? Because you're doing nothing. Okay. All they're doing is getting more power. And you know what? We're the ones giving it. And until we each one teach one that the power is in our hands, we're not going to go anywhere. I don't care how many Zoom meetings it doesn't matter. If we don't teach people what it is to grow food, if we don't teach people what it is to fight back, if we don't teach people that your life matters and that your vote does matter, because at this point, with all the corruption within the system of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, people keep losing that sight that their vote matters nothing. And that's a lie. But we have to definitely go out there and literally make leaders. Each one has to be ready to teach one. Because, I mean, I can do all I want, but I'm only one person, honey. But you know what? If we get together, then that makes what? How many on this call now? There's 6 of us now, or 5 of us, right? But if we can get together and go into your development, where you live, and start making leaders, then we can start seeing a change. But until we stick together, it is not going to happen. We have to stop fighting each other. We got to stay together. If one has a problem, we all need to show up. Right now, the eviction rate is happening real fast. You know why? Because they promised this COVID-19 relief on rent. That money, by the time it gets down to public housing, guess what? There is no more money. It is made by design so that our people can be homeless. It is made by design. Now, I totally don't blame them, because you should know better. You should pay your rent at all costs. That's what I was taught. No matter what, if you're hungry, you make sure your rent is paid, because a plate of food will come up, but you pay your rent. So I'm not saying that the government alone is accountable. You're accountable for your own actions. That much I do know. But they misled our people. Misled them. And I've got, like, maybe this week alone, we've had 20 evictions in this 1 week. So what else is going to happen? Where else are we going to go? And again, it's about us teaming up and making sure that we're there for one another. That's the only way this is going to happen. We can keep talking. We can keep preaching. But if we're not people of action, nothing is going to happen. We need to grow our own food. We need to make sure that our truckers, yes, our truckers are not abandoned, because most of them are. Okay? But we need to make sure we teach our young people what it is to grow food and why they should grow it. There's just
I
so
have a
many things
response.
that we need to do. Yes, love.
Yes, sir. I have a response to you, but also at the time we have a question, and then you may have something you want to say right now. So just wanted to know what you wanted. Which order
Well,
do you
Dennis,
want? You want me to say?
go ahead. Why don't you respond? I do have some things I want to say, but go
All right. I just want
respond
people
first.
to know something. Former Surgeon General of the United States, Jocelyn Elders, is a proposal. We're circulating it right now, and it's around COVID, where she's calling on all of the virologists of the whole world to sort of do a reset, because the public has not been, particularly in certain nations, has not been informed properly, just in terms of the concept of what their role should be in what she's calling public health. Now, public health was something that got invented in the United States, right here in New York City, over on 80th Street, where the All Souls Church created what was called the Sanitary Commission. And this was around the time of 1861, when the war was going on. But to say what she's talking about and to reference this, public health means water, clean water, but a water system, which is kind of important, as we know, over in Queens because of the floods, sanitation, straightforward, food and nutritious food, and housing. All of those things, because if you do vaccinations and people don't have proper sanitation or proper water, whether that's in a nation like our nation or a developing nation, and you look at what's going on right now with Africa, right? People were ignoring Africa for all these months, over a year, and now you're talking about a new variant of coronavirus coming out of there, like you didn't know that had to happen. And so you can't ignore any area of the world. But at the same time, because you can't ignore any area, you got to also do things on a local level. Just wanted to point out that we had an old idea back in the 90s. We talked about when Lyndon LaRouche actually ran in 1988, he had something up in New Hampshire called the Citizens Committees for Local Economic Development. And then later on, we talked about the idea of precinct organization. That was the old style, as Carmen may very well know, of the party organizations in New York City, both Republican and Democratic. They used to be organized on the basis of precincts. And that's exactly the idea of having several blocks in which things happen. That's not so easy to automatically do if you don't have a vision. You got to have a larger international and national vision, because you can't go to the local level unless you've got, especially with something like COVID, because COVID is international by definition. Yet, the measures we have and we have to take, we've already seen from last year, they're prepared to put trillions of dollars together, at the drop of a hat. Matter of fact, over in Glasgow, they were just talking about putting $130 trillion together to solve a problem that might not even exist in the way that they, in that way. So I just wanted to point out that there is an ability to do this. There are precedents for doing it. There are precedents in the United States for doing it. And the kind of thing that Diane has been talking about around her independent campaign, that was the whole point, was to avoid that pitfall of the partisan divide. So that was what I wanted to say, Diane. And we have one question, but I don't know if you want to respond first, and then we go to the question.
And I'd like to
Well,
just say one last thing, if that's okay.
go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Danette.
I just want to say that yes, we have to do whatever we can in the forefront, but I don't want our work to be in vain, because as long as we have crooked politics in power and running the show, we're going to continue to get kicked and punched and shut down in the middle of our progress. Once they see that, we're getting together, we're uniting, we're getting strength in numbers, and we're starting to actually make some changes, especially in the minds of people who are asleep right now. There are people who really literally do not know what's going on around them. They don't understand how badly they're being violated in every which way. Their rights, their voice, their pockets, everything is being under attack, and so what we have to understand is that we need to wake up people and say, listen, hey, you're not hearing this in the media, or you might be and you don't understand what you're listening to, what you just heard. You might not know, you're not learning this in the schools, you're not learning this, but listen up here. Right now there are people in power who do not want you to succeed, and that has to shake you up and make you a little angry and make you decide that, hey, I want to have a voice. I want to be able to stand up for my rights, and I want to be able to leave, a legacy for my children, and I don't want to just get by in life. I want to leave a legacy. And how can I leave a legacy if the government just keeps, pounding down on me every time, I go an inch? And so we have to, yes, okay, we have to unite and we have to do what we can in the forefront, but we have to eliminate crooked politics. We have to get people fired. We have to make noise. We have to get people to actually do their jobs. We have to shake up the government. We have to shake up the system. We cannot just allow things to continue the way they're going, because it's just not there. We're not going to have an America. We're not going to have an America 20, 30 years from now. All right. And so I think it's crucial and it's important that we get the word out somehow, some way, maybe through things like this, but we have to find out a way to, like the other lady was saying, like Carmen was saying, we have to maybe do like little committees, where we're educating each other, and we're actually making progress within our communities, and then expanding that out, and leaving no man behind. We have to help each other. We have to help each other. We have to come together and help each other. We, the citizens of this country, we have to help this country, and we have to help its citizens. We cannot rely on the government anymore. If it means even elimination of government programs, yeah, I know that sounds scary to a lot of people, but I think that, we need to self-sustain. We need to learn how to self-sustain. Okay, God gave us 2 arms, 2 legs. He gave us a brain. We need to learn to self-sustain. The more that we are dependent and relying on the government, the more the government is dehumanizing us, and that cannot continue. Anyway, that's all I want to say.
All right. Well, maybe I'll just take a minute here to respond, because first of all, Danette, if you think about what we did in your neighborhood after the floods, that was, I think, exactly an example of that, because we had the meeting in the back alley where we talked to 60 or 70 people in the neighborhood, and we talked about the infrastructure that should be built, namely the Outer Harbor Gateway, the storm surge barrier, the sewers, the drains, and people were very clear that there is absolutely no reason for this flooding to happen except for the criminal negligence of certain people. And then we later learned that, in fact, way back in 1976, it had been determined that a dedicated sewer line was supposed to have been built when that neighborhood had 50,000 people. Now you have 150,000 people, and you didn't even build the infrastructure for 50,000 people. So when the meeting happened with the lady from FEMA, the people, rather than being very small-minded, and of course people were upset and angry about how little money FEMA was giving them and how difficult the process was, but what everyone kept saying was infrastructure, 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 which is exactly on the level that it has to be. Because the other thing that we have to have in mind here is there is a principle of natural law. If you think about what happened in Germany when the Berlin Wall came down, why did that happen? Well, Lyndon LaRouche forecasted a year in advance And he forecast actually 6 years in advance the disintegration of the Soviet Union, of that communist bloc of nations, the failure economically. And that's what happened. People ran and they were out of toilet paper and sugar and coffee, and you had to wait in line at the store for hours and hours to get a loaf of bread, which was being rationed. And at a certain point, in East Germany, people said, we're not going to live like this anymore. And they didn't pick up guns. In fact, it was different. It was very much like Martin Luther King's understanding of Gandhi and the nonviolent principle, where they said, I would rather die, I would rather stand in front of a tank than live like a slave. And so certain events came about. There was a misinterpretation of an announcement that people could travel, and it was heard as the wall has come down, and people just moved. And the military was not willing to fire on people. There was really a kind of a revolution, which actually was on a very high level, because it wasn't based on aggression, I guess I'll say it that way. It wasn't based on violence. It was based on a principle of what it means to be a human being, and the fact that a system which goes against the laws of God, a system which goes against natural law, cannot sustain itself. Well, we have here, I showed that picture of that disgusting, fat, blood-filled tick at the beginning, because what we now have is a system of finance which is in violation of the principles of gravity. We have a bubble on the stock exchange. There is no bubble ever in history that did not burst at some point. This thing is going to collapse. So the question, I think we have to do a huge job of educating people, because as this thing disintegrates, do people know what to do? What would you do if you suddenly found yourself in charge of a government? What would be the policies that are needed? How do you ensure that people have electricity, have food, have safe water, have a society which functions? Because we are human beings, and if you think of a human being being turned loose in the wilderness by itself, it probably wouldn't last very long. We depend on a certain form of society, and that's why a government is formed, to ensure that we have actually freedom to develop our mind, to develop our creativity, because we don't have to worry that we're going to be eaten by a bear or a wolf. Some of the horrible things that are happening to the farmers in Germany. I don't know if, Angel, if you heard that presentation, it was pretty terrifying. But we have a situation where this old system is definitely going to collapse. And the question is, can we organize ourselves? Can we not allow ourselves to be divided, which is exactly the game played by the news media and the social medias, to make people divided, but to present the right policies, like the great infrastructure projects that would stop the flooding, but in every part of the country. Water management. It's absurd that we have forest fires in one area and floods in another. Water management has been done by human beings for thousands of years. We're not barbarians, or we shouldn't act like barbarians. So these are the things. But I think in a way, it's a very dire situation. It's very bleak. But part of the reason it is so bleak is that these people who have created these hideous conditions, these billionaires who got 25% richer during the pandemic when everyone else was losing everything, they are reaching the border of the end of their system. And we have to demand a system that is just, not just that we get by, not that we don't get evicted from an apartment that doesn't have gas for our cooking, but that we have a standard of living that is worthy of human dignity. So that's what I would say right now. Dennis may have questions.
Well, actually, Diane, you in part answered some of the questions we had, and I wonder in terms of the schedule, what you want to do, because we're sort of coming up on time. You want to go to
Yeah,
sort of responses from people? It might be better, and then
yeah, I think,
summarize.
yeah, we probably should wrap up. So if people have things they would
Okay,
like to say, it would
let
then
me do
address
the
it.
follow.
Go ahead, Derek.
We have one question which was directed to Scott in part. So in his summary, he may be able to take part of it up. The question was saying you shared some very important information regarding the difficulty of finding employment while dealing with homelessness. What's your experience like living within that shelter and assisted housing program? Were there and if you would share some of that, if you wouldn't mind. So maybe when you, as you summarize, you could address some of that.
Okay, first of all, when I lived in 8 different shelters when I was in the system, and they would transfer me on a regular basis. They did have people who were nominally there to help you with that, but they really were not able to do that. They were able to help you find certain kinds of jobs that I was not going to be able to do in my condition, and that wouldn't be sustainable for a lot of people. They could help you find fast food, and they could help you find security guard and janitorial, and that's about it. There really weren't a lot of options in terms of what the people there could do. That's why they would send you into the program with the job developer, the do nothing job developer. Oh, I knew there was something I was supposed to do. Yeah, that was literally one of the job developers I had. I did have a few comments about some other things. You mentioned the concrete cowboys lost their space because of the government acquiring that for $1. Well, in New York, we have serious problems with that in terms of the housing, because they will give land, government owned land, to these private developers for $1 on the grounds that they'll build affordable housing. And the affordable housing that they build is affordable to people who make $120,000 a year. So it's a total scam where they're stealing from people, and it's these corporations who are paying off the government. And that's the same kind of people we have in office, because as I ran as a Green Party candidate for city council against a crook who owns a brownstone while living in low income housing and collects rent on that, and she got a big campaign donation made to her sister's charity, and she lives with her sister, so that um, is a problem there. So we've got a really corrupt system, and the press just totally ignored me. They trashed Mealy when she was running in the primary. She had been in the city council before, termed out, and the term limits are only temporary. They're only so you can't have more than 2 consecutive terms. And she primaried the woman who's in there now, and nobody heard from me. And I keep checking. New York One still says she won with only 62 precincts reporting. So I see there's 62% of the precincts reporting. So I see there's a lot of corruption going on at all levels, and I don't really know how an independent can make it, because I mean, my friend Marnie ran in the Chelsea area. She came in 5th out of 6 when she ran as a Democrat, and the person who came in 4th spent a lot more money than she did.
Okay. Uh, Carmen, you want to say something?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for having this town hall. Um, I just want to say that there's just so much wrong. I mean, we got a lot of things right, but more wrong. And I say that because when you're out in the forefront all the time, and you see people suffering, I mean, mental illness is at an all-time high, homelessness at an all-time high, and you see people literally fighting to get food. That, these things are a problem, and it hurts your heart. And so I just want you to know that I'm here for whatever anybody needs, but I really believe that we need to go out to this community and really start galvanizing people, making committees in different blocks, people that want to be on a housing committee. You have community board 7, you have community board 6, all these community boards and all this stuff, and they're not here for us. It's not about us. And so we have to start organizing for ourselves. I've been doing that, not for nothing, but I've been very successful. I have developments under my belt right now that we're getting ready to go into um, resident management. I've been fighting this for 5 years. PAC and RAD, and the blueprint is something to get people, um, bring in private landlords and destroy our people. They fix the outside, but they don't fix the infrastructure. And so they promise these people tubs and all this kind of stuff, and the infrastructure is not being fixed. People still have leaks. People still have rodents. People still have, and my job is almost 24 hours a day. And so all I can say is that we have to get rid of these elected officials, and I don't care what we have to do it. Um, I don't have hair on my tongue, so I go after them all the time, and I think that that's the key. Uh, that we're not afraid, right? Being afraid is not going to get us anywhere. We need to move forward. We need to be diligent in what we believe in. And that's the human race. And like I said, I got 19 grandkids, 13 great grand. What is going to happen to them? And I have to teach them what it is to fight. I have to show them what's right and what's wrong. I have to teach them that, you got to grow food. I come from a family, we grew food, you know. Um, we just have to each one teach one and keep doing it and not stopping and not start one thing and then not ending it. We have to keep on and keep on, and we have to be there for each other no matter what. There should be no excuses. If one needs you, we all need to be there. So, I want to thank Susan. I love you, girl. You're such a strong force, and I'm looking forward to working with you. Um, One thing that I was taught, especially with this election, the city council election, they thought that I wasn't going to go through the whole thing. First, they thought they had me at the primary. And then when they saw that I was on the independent line, they said, my God, this chick is still here. So, and that's what I mean about not giving up. It doesn't matter if you win. It matters what you do. It matters that you send your message no matter what, and letting people know you're not giving up. So watch out for me because I'm still here and I'm coming after you. And that's what we need to show them, that we are not afraid. We're going to continue to fight, no matter what, no matter what. So I want to thank you guys for being here. Thanks for the invite. Um, Please, if you need my number, it's 347-499-0025. I really appreciate you guys just, telling your stories. And Susan, you're my girl. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's your name now. Uh, Angel?
Well, I have to ask, PAC and RAD, is that the New York Housing Authority? I'm Kansas, forgive
That's,
me.
yeah, that's their way of privatizing New York City housing. What happens is Rat Pack, what they do is they turn everything to Section 8, right? And once they turn it to Section 8, you actually lose all of your rights because we're Section 9. So Section 9 gives us more rights than with Section 8. The Rat Pack, those are for developers. They bring in these $1 million developers. They promise everybody a new home. And what they do is they fix the outside, but they don't do the infrastructure. If you have leaks, don't worry, it's going to come through your wall anyway. So, and we've been trying to fight that um, through the grace of God, because only through His grace I have been successful. to now move into resident management, and I have 12 other developments that are going to come under me. So it's a blessing. God is good.
Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. Well, I don't know how to close this out other than we can feed y'all if allowed. We can definitely grow it out here, do so without any harm or ill towards anyone, and still be able to grow that crop next year, which means we can do it environmentally positive way. It breaks us our heart to see California on fire. We know exactly how it got there. We know that roads were closed and access was delayed and closed out of human inhabitants and human use, and a lot of fuel built up on the ground. And it once it caught on fire, they called that natural and needed, and they allowed a lot of it to burn and didn't intervene until it posed a threat to communities. It breaks our heart. It seems so incredibly unnecessary, but we understand that that is pretty much the goal of the majority of the United States, is that they want to turn us into a wilderness area and import all of our foods. So my answer is, if I could give any advice to anybody, the next time you do talk to your representative, ask them where they are on cool labeling. If you want more information about that, the lead organization is RCAF USA. That'd be the letter R and then CALF for baby cow USA. And the whole, one of the biggest reasons why they came into being is to demand USA labeling on American products. We're pretty sure that most Americans would choose to buy American if they knew what they were buying on the shelf. So thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I hope I don't sound too weird coming from Kansas. I enjoy getting to know y'all. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you as well, very, very much. Do we still have Danette with us? She's still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Boom, there you are. You have somebody with you.
Yeah, this is Blanco.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What's that? Is he a member of the Black Panther Party or what? Okay. So which one of you is going to speak?
Well, I'll speak for now. He's a little busy.
All right.
I wanted to ask to my son. Did you have a question?
No, we're doing summary remarks, and then Diane's going to close it out. So we just giving you the chance to say whatever your thoughts are.
I was having a conversation with my son the other day on how I feel that we need to bring everything back to America. Like, we need to make sure that our gas is, from USA, and all our produce and our products and stuff like that. And he was like, oh, but it's cheaper if we do business overseas. And I said, yeah, well, that's the problem. We're doing business overseas to save money, but yet, our citizens are losing jobs and are going hungry and are having to deal with inflation. So how is that benefiting us? But still he believes oh, but it's cheaper. So I'm like, what is it that he's listening to on the news, or where is he getting this, that it's, better to go across, overseas to do business, because that's somehow better.
Well, that's a good entry point for you, Diane.
Yeah, well, actually, this really gets at certain fundamentals, because there are two kinds of spirals. There's one that goes down and one that goes up. And what I mean by that is that in the harmony of interest, Henry Carey, who was an advisor to Abraham Lincoln, who supported the idea of a tariff, because free trade is something the British always used, and it always meant drug running and slavery, because they would use it to suppress the industry of countries that they wanted to keep backwards, like the US, which is why the British supported the Confederacy. They wanted the United States to be a slave owning place that would never advance industrially and would produce cotton and tobacco and no finished goods. Now, the interesting thing, and what Kerry actually proves with a number of examples, is if you put a protective tariff, not like a trade war, not like the trade wars we sort of had with China, but a reasonable protective tariff to keep your people in business and keep your people employed, because clearly the labor standards in the United States, at least formerly, were higher. Our people had a higher standard of living, were better educated, produced a higher quality good than something produced by child labor in a sweatshop somewhere. So if you keep those people employed at decent wages and you put tariffs on the things that are imported, well, the standard of living is higher. So you can afford actually to spend more money if you want to buy silk from China, or you want to buy some exotic fruit that comes from Peru or Argentina. If you're working, you will have the money to do that. And what you also do is it creates the conditions where the other nations will want to improve their standard of living to your level. So instead of us trying to compete with someone who's being paid 25 cents a day and grinding up our workforce, you maintain a standard of a high standard of living in your nation, and that encourages other nations to attain the same standard of living, and the consumer actually can afford to consume more because you're employed and you have a decent standard of living. And that is just part of the way the universe is created. It is interesting and natural that when you fight for the good of mankind, when you fight for the good of another human being, you will discover ultimately that the world is better for yourself. And I think this is the commitment we all have to have. I just really want to thank everyone so much for being on with me today. I want to thank all of you for what you do, because all of you are contributing to the progress of mankind. And we are going to have to be pretty bold. I think everyone here is a bit of a troublemaker. It's interesting that we have three of us who've run for office before. That's what it takes. I like the idea of producing. We need to create more leaders, absolutely. And leadership is absolutely not a title, and it doesn't have to do with whether you win an election. It has to do with a different quality. And Lyndon LaRouche said you can always tell a leader because a leader creates more leaders, not drones, not sheep, but more leaders. So I just really want to thank everybody for being with us today. And I would like to encourage people, maybe Dennis, you want to say something about what's happening tomorrow at 2:00, and then we'll wrap up.
Right. Well, we
Thank
have
you.
a show tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. Yes, let's just say thank everybody that's on: Carmen, Angel, Scott, and Danette. Yeah, tomorrow afternoon we'll be doing a show. This one will have Mike Billington from our Executive Intelligence Review magazine, also a former political prisoner with Lyndon LaRouche, Hussein Askari, who is just participated in a conference that happened in the nation of Yemen, which featured many spokespersons from the Schiller Institute. He'll be on to talk a bit about that conference, give us sort of a description of it, as well as Doug Maluk, who is another one of the organizers here from the United States, who does a lot of the, both on our phones and in our daily work. And they'll be joining Diane in a conversation we're going to be having. And what we'll be talking about in that case is something that Helga Sepp LaRouche invented, looking at and in discussion with people on the question of Afghanistan. Everybody's aware, of course, or should be aware, there are over 22 million people that are in danger of starving over there at the moment. And David Beasley from the World Food Program, former governor of South Carolina, he's working at the United Nations and has been there for several years, has talked about how he could lead an effort to save the lives of 42 million people, save them from starving to death, with only a few billions of dollars. He named a figure like 7 billion, 6.5, 7 billion. And sort of a back and forth happened between him and Elon Musk about this. But what's relevant is that Helga said, well, what we really need is something which she named after a very well-known in that part of the world, in Southwest Asia, figure. His name was Avicenna, or Ibn Sina. He was known for 600 years all over the world as being the greatest physician, most important doctor that had lived. He died about 1030, so over between the years of 1000 roughly and 1600. His book was used all over the world, in all parts of Europe and Asia and so on. And so she called it Operation Ibn Sina. And the ideas will be at a conference. It was in the nation of Yemen. These ideas were presented in a very particular way. So we'll be discussing that tomorrow, and we're going to be discussing it in relationship to how to deal with the issue of famine, food insecurity, and reversing world hunger. So that will be tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Right, and that's being broadcast by the LaRouche organization, I believe.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's
yeah,
right.
Good. So thank you very much again, everyone. Really, I think we have potential to do some really big things with this group. And to all of my listeners, I'll see you next Friday. And to all of my listeners and supporters of my campaign, we need you. So please sign up at sareforsenate.com to volunteer, to donate funds, and to let me know if you'll be available to help with the petitioning next year. So thanks very much, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, Diane, and God bless you all.